All right, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going over another book in the psychotherapy, psychodynamic, psychoanalytic space. If you don't know of this book or of this author, then I hope you stick around because we're going to be talking about Nancy McWilliams' Psychoanalytic Diagnosis. And I believe that this may be one of the best books that I've read on the topic. Quick aside, while I was reading this book, Nancy McWilliams was actually doing a talk in my area, so I got to go and listen to her speak about some of the contents in the book and to tell some stories of her time, with patients and some anecdotes and things. It was really nice to get to hear her speak in person. And now that I've finished the book in its entirety, I'm excited to share it with you because, like I said, it's been such an enlightening read. So starts off with the question, why diagnose in the first place? And it comes down to this. In the modern landscape, there is a lot of push to diagnose distinct illnesses as such, and that push comes in large part from the pharmaceutical industry so that they can attach particular medications to distinct illness categories and say, this is the treatment, and so it's easy to market, it's easy to sell things. But Nancy McWilliams is suggesting what a lot of us believe, which is that we're not treating distinct illnesses as such, we're treating individuals. And these are individuals with personal problems, with life histories, and they're carrying this around. And so if we want to do the deep work of really getting into the issues that underline everything and helping people to feel more fulfilled and to live a happier life, then it goes beyond the DSM categories and just attaching particular symptoms from a history that you get to certain boxes of illnesses and saying, oh, you have this, you have this. It's really that you have individuals and they've been through a lot of suffering oftentimes, and they've come up with adaptive patterns in the moment that have become maladaptive over time. And so through working with them, we try to understand where they're actually coming from, what's actually going on, and help them to see their self and their life from a new perspective so that they can move forward with more healthy coping styles. So the book goes on to go into a really nice and in-depth discussion of defense mechanisms. So even if you're already familiar with the defense mechanisms, it's really nice to hear how she explains them. And then she goes on to talk about different personality structures, and I'll go through the personality structures that she covers in the book. Talks about psychopathic or antisocial personality structures, narcissistic personalities, schizoid, paranoid, depressive and manic, masochistic or self-defeating personalities, obsessive and compulsive personalities, hysterical, in the old term, or histrionic personalities, and dissociative personalities. And what I really like is as she goes through and describes these different personality structures, she doesn't approach it forthwith as a pathologized personality. She describes it in a way that you can see a bit of yourself, a bit of your own behavioral patterns and your own way of going through life in most, if not all of these. She approaches it from the standpoint of, this is a particular personality structure. Here's how it's adaptive. Here's how, if one relies on this personality structure too much, it becomes maladaptive. And here's how it truly becomes a disorder that you may associate more with a DSM, personality disorder diagnosis. So it's very humanizing, I would say, her language and the way that she approaches her explanations of each of these. She talks about, how it may be helpful, as I said. She talks about why someone may have adopted this personality structure over the course of their life, what may be a part of their background. And she uses examples from patients that she's had over her tenure to back this up, as well as tons of references. I mean, you got to see the references at the end of this book. It's like this thick, just references. So talks about that. Talks about how it goes wrong. Then she gets into her ideas on the best way to approach patients with each of these personality structures within a therapeutic context. how to build up the therapeutic alliance best with each of these different types of personalities. She talks about what you may expect to find in the transference and countertransference when interacting with patients that have each of these personalities. And what's really nice is she then goes into an explanation of how each personality is often mixed up with certain others. And then she talks about why that's a problem because of the differences in how you would want to approach someone therapeutically with each of these personality structures. And then she talks about what are the real differences and how might you tease out the differences, because it's important at the end of the day that if you're going to work this sort of conceptualization into your formulation of a patient, of course you want to be accurate so that you're interacting with the patient in an appropriate way so that you can make the most efficient use of your time, but also enact the most amount of healing possible within that therapeutic context. So it's really nice that she goes through all this explanation. She gives lots of further reading for each of the personality structures. It's just a really rich book. And I wanted to touch a bit on some more specifics. The chapter on dissociative personalities I found to just be really informative. The whole book's informative, of course, but this was just, the way that she approaches the topic of dissociation, which is somewhat contentious, I know, was really nice and a bit eye-opening about how to conceptualize dissociation, dissociative identity disorder, the whole spectrum of dissociative personality structure, why someone may have adapted that way, what's really going on, how it seems, how it appears from the outside, anecdotes from patients. And I just found it really enlightening, and I look forward to learning more about that as I move forward. I found it really interesting, the differences, the comparisons between a depressive personality structure and a masochistic or a self-defeating personality structure. If that sounds like a bit of a foreign idea to you, then again, I certainly recommend reading this book, because as she goes on in the book, there's a different approach that you would want to take to someone with each of those personality structures, and they're in some ways inverses of each other. So you could perhaps go in the wrong direction if you didn't have that nailed down correctly in your formulation, whether you're working with someone who's truly more depressive or truly more masochistic. And as she describes, whether it's the combination of those two personality structures or any other combination, oftentimes these do overlap to some degree. And it's important to be aware that it's appropriate at times to continually update that formulation in your own mind as you're working with someone. Are they presenting at this point in the treatment with more emphasis on this personality structure or the other? And being able to adjust, being able to live within the therapy and let it be a living, breathing thing that's ebbing and flowing and adjusting to the patient at that time in their life. These therapies are typically long-term therapies, and so sometimes they could be up to years in length, and so it makes sense that you're not going to set up an initial approach from the very beginning and then rigidly stick to it. So this book, Understanding Personality Structure in the Clinical Process by Nancy McWilliams, Psychoanalytic Diagnosis, it's the second edition, is one of my favorites. And I look forward to reading more of her work. I look forward to going through some of the further readings that she suggests in the book. And I hope that you will give it a look, give it a chance. There's also an audiobook on Audible, at least, for this book, which is nice. Some of these more niche books don't have audiobooks, so something you could even listen to as you're driving back and forth from work. And I just want to say that I feel really fortunate to be in the position I'm in and to have had the mentors I've had in my life up to this point to have really gotten me on track with this conceptualization of psychiatric patients. I think it's so important that as we move forward and everything is there's such an attempt to break everything down to distinct diagnoses, and even the language around it does bother me to some degree, saying that someone has this or has that after an intake or after, you know, a patient interview, saying, okay, well now you magically have this thing. It presents it as though it's an external thing that someone has caught, like a virus, like the flu. Like it exists here, you're here, and it, you know, comes within you, and now you have this thing. It's I don't think it's the right language for the types of things we're dealing with. I think that it's important to maintain a more human approach, use more humanistic language, and understand that these are adaptive patterns and defenses that people have learned to employ over time, and that it has become more harm than good as they've grown. And because of the nature of their subconscious, you know, the fact that it's subconscious, these defense mechanisms that they're using, it's important that they have someone who understands what's going on and can help them see for themselves how there's another way to approach life, and that the problems from their youth either aren't the problems in the present, or they don't have to be in the future. So I think that, as I was saying, I just feel fortunate to be on this journey of learning, and I'm really glad that as I move forward and interact further with patients, that I'll have this framework to work from. I think it really is for the best for patients. And so anyone who's watching these videos where we discuss these things, I'm glad to have you on this journey with me. If you have any questions, or if you have anything you'd like to add, as always, let me know in the comments. And again, I just appreciate your time watching these videos. I really enjoy learning, reading these books, and having a place to discuss them with other people. So if you like this video, press like, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks.